4-point-something seconds to make a decision.
Put the knife down!
What are you, God?
No justice, no peace!
I got killed for no reason!
Welcome and thank you for joining us for this Facing Race special. I'm Sharon Yu. In September, after 13 years, a federal judge ruled the Seattle Police Department can operate independently without the guardrails of federal oversight. Mayor Bruce Harrell and other city leaders celebrated the decision outside the federal courthouse in downtown Seattle on September 3rd.
You take a consent decree, you learn from it, and the term a learning organization becomes critical. We never said that our police department was perfect, but we did say is we have a commitment to get better and better, and that's what we're doing. So now we're in a situation where crime rates are actually going down, our police recruiting is going up, we're building an unarmed response as well. We have outstanding leadership, as you see all around us in the police department. So we are in the right trajectory, and we need to acknowledge that, and that was the validation we got from Judge Robart today.
How did the city of Seattle end up under federal oversight? The fatal shooting of a First Nations woodcarver, John T. Williams, on August 30th, 2010, was the trigger. Prior to the shooting death of Williams, police brutality was something many Black, Indigenous people of color dealt with. Former King 5 investigative reporter Linda Byron exposed the disturbing pattern in 2012.
Hey, put the knife down!
The fatal police shooting of Native woodcarver John T. Williams. An undercover officer kicking an African-American teen who appears to be surrendering. A veteran gang officer using racially charged language. These and other cases were at the heart of the ACLU's call for a federal investigation into the Seattle Police Department's use of excessive force.
It showed a pretty consistent pattern that people of color were being targeted.
The Department of Justice is pushing for a consent decree, a court-enforced settlement with the city of Seattle for major reforms in how police officers do their jobs. Yet the city's proposal, recently delivered to Justice, deals only with curtailing excessive force. It says nothing about ways to ensure minorities are not being treated differently.
And that signals to the communities of color in Seattle that they aren't important enough to be included in these very important documents.
The chairman of Seattle's Human Rights Commission calls it a glaring omission.
We want to have effective reforms that address excessive use of force and that address bias policing.
Mayor Mike McGinn.
The Department of Justice didn't make any findings that they were biased. They omitted a finding of bias. So we're, of course, under no obligation to respond to them, but we are responding to the community concerns by including it in our 2020 plan.
There are also growing concerns about settlement negotiations over police reform being conducted in secret. 34 organizations backed the ACLU's call for the federal investigation, which found that Seattle police illegally use force 20% of the time.
Yet the very community groups that asked the Department of Justice to step in say they have been left out, with no seat at the table as Justice negotiates with the city for an agreement.
We have asked over and over to be at the table.
Estela Ortega is executive director of El Centro de la Raza.
We're the ones that raise the issues. We are the communities that have suffered the brunt of police brutality and racial profiling.
A collaborative approach has worked in other cities. Cincinnati hammered out a memorandum of agreement with the DOJ and police, calling for more than 100 changes in procedures, training, and use of force. But Cincinnati didn't stop there. A collaborative agreement with the ACLU, Black leaders, the city, and police union led to more reforms, including a citizen board to investigate police misconduct.
I am very intrigued by the idea of a community agreement. Because, if you have the buy-in of the police union and the buy-in of the community, I think those are very good predictors of success.
In Seattle, Linda Byron, 5 News.
Given the historical tension between the people of Seattle and its police department, when then Seattle police officer Ian Burke shot and killed First Nations woodcarver John T. Williams, the city erupted. 3 deer stretch across the pavement at this intersection in downtown Seattle. They're indigenous symbols of safe passage. And at Boren and Howell, they're a reminder of the man a Seattle police officer killed here 15 years ago.
Walk sign is on, crossing Boren Avenue. Walk sign is on, crossing Boren Avenue.
Put the knife down!
On August 30th, 2010, Officer Ian Burke fatally shot First Nations woodcarver John T. Williams. This dashcam video shows Williams on the ground with Burke nearby shortly after the shooting. John was carrying a piece of cedar and a small carving knife in his hand, a common tool of the trade. Officer Burke gave John 4 seconds to put the knife away. 4 seconds.
4-point-something seconds to make a decision.
Before ending a life and shattering a family.
What are you, God?
Okay.
Carved with the grain. Oh yeah, I see.
Since his brother's murder, Rick Williams carves every day.
I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. I like I said, I start visiting my grandfather, teaching what I know as a carver.
Teaching carving as a sacred Nuchanoth art form, as a way of expressing First Nations identity at the Tahoma Indian Center.
And that's something I want to teach the students here. It's not about the money, it's about heritage.
These days, Rick lives to carve. But there were days when Rick and his younger brother John carved to live.
We were born into a famous carving family, you know, to share history. It's in the history books that one of my great-grandfathers stood this close to the Queen of England. John was 12 when he first sold his carving to the Smithsonian or the museum in England.
All that stopped when John was given 4 seconds to drop his carving knife. People protested the shooting, demanding Officer Burke's resignation and for him to be held responsible. 6 months after John T. Williams was killed, the King County inquest jury heard testimony from witnesses, experts, reviewed dashcam audio, and heard from Burke himself.
A lot of things were going through my mind, and difficult, tough, difficult situation to find myself in. Difficult decision to have to make.
An inquest, while not a trial, is a fact-finding hearing that is used specifically for deaths involving police officers in King County. Ian Burke's inquest lasted 4 days, with jurors concluding Burke fired his weapon unnecessarily.
Did the late Mr. Williams have sufficient time to put the knife down after Officer Burke's order? Yes, 1. No, 4. Unknown, 3. Did John T. Williams then pose an imminent threat of serious physical harm to Officer Burke? Yes, 1. No, 4. Unknown, 3.
Despite the inquest results, Burke never faced criminal charges.
So in order to prosecute Officer Burke, we would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he acted with evil intent. There is no proof of this.
He was forced to resign from the SPD as announced by then Seattle Police Chief John Diaz.
Ian Burke did not follow his training when engaging John T. Williams, and that his decision to use deadly force did not conform to department policy.
When you do that,
For Rick Williams, John's brother, this moment was the start of something bigger. He wanted to move the focus away from John's struggles leading up to his killing, the challenges John faced as an unhoused Indigenous man living with alcohol addiction.
But you show the last week of John's life. That's where your mentality is. That's why you're talking to me like that, and that's exactly why you're dismissed. They didn't like it, but I got tired of the way people put my brother down because they believed what the news said, John T.'s last week of life.
At the time of the investigation and Burke's inquest, the police department released a photo of Williams's knife open against a ruler. But a federal investigation eventually found John's carving knife was actually closed, and he never approached Officer Burke. In 2012, the Seattle Police Department entered a federal consent decree, a court-ordered agreement with the Department of Justice to reform use of force, biased policing, and officer accountability.
I think it's actually getting worse, policing across the country.
Joseph Sia is one of the commissioners of the Seattle's Community Policing Commission. The commission formed as part of the reform effort.
Hearing about the way that he was brutally murdered didn't sit right with me. But I also understand that it's deep-seated racial aggression that this country has against indigenous people, against black people, and that continues to show up in the ways that we do policing.
But Sia and the commission say it's time to rely on local powers for change and to leave the federal consent decree behind. The commission has filed an amicus brief saying the consent decree should go away. So why is that?
I believe that change can also happen from the local level. And so, it is a strategy. I mean, we see the leadership at the federal level, it's not there. And so I don't think that there necessarily needs to be a worship of a mandate from the federal level. There is a strategy around having Seattle and the police commission sort of model what it means to do change locally, what it means to change the laws around crowd management, what it means to really work with the police unions to make sure that they are following city ordinance and laws, and that the contracts that are signed, are aligned with more humanistic policing practices.
You got to get right into it here.
At the Seattle Center,
You ready for your next lesson?
under a totem pole's shadow,
I know you didn't come here to whittle.
Rick Williams adjusts to being close to John again.
Been a couple years since I sat here. Oh, yeah, I'm home.
Rick installed this totem pole in 2012 as a tribute to his brother.
I usually stand here and I take a look around and see if anybody's watching, and I go like this. Give it a hug. I'm still here, bro.
Carving
Do this cut first, like this.
through the pain of loss.
I hurt. I do miss my brother, but in the world as I see it, I don't want Dana Mark to die in Seattle.
So he lives to carve, to teach.
I'm really proud of these kids.
From brother to brother, now from teacher to student, one cedar chip at a time.
This is our heritage. This is our livelihood. This is the way we grew up. I spent 65 years of my life carving, and I haven't missed a day.
From the beginning of the consent decree to its end, we break down the timeline, including partial lifts and repeated scrutiny on SPD's practices. Flanked by members of the police department, Mayor Bruce Harrell and Seattle Police Chief Sean Barnes said the lifting of the consent decree has been a long time coming.
Crime rates are actually going down. Our police recruiting is going up. We're building an unarmed response as well.
The end of the consent decree is just the foundation. We've built this house, and now we're going to continue to make it better each and every day.
In 2018, a federal court ruled the city had, quote, achieved full and effective compliance with the consent decree and entered a sustainment period. But in 2020, as the department responded to protests following the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, a report found at times it did not comply with its policies mandated by the consent decree. In 2023, the federal court lifted several provisions granting SPD partial termination of the consent decree, but crowd control tactics and accountability systems remained under federal oversight. Then in July of 2025, the city of Seattle filed a motion to terminate the consent decree entirely. The Department of Justice responded in support of full termination. Rick Williams, John T. Williams' brother, was also at the hearing.
I hope they do start being accountable for their actions, because Seattle Police Department showed their colors by defending Burke and sending these people after me.
With the consent decree lifted, one question remains. Is the city satisfied with the changes SPD has made in the past 13 years? Community Police Commission's Executive Director E.C. Ame weighs in.
Satisfaction, no. We're not satisfied with what we're seeing, but we recognize that there's been change and improvement. But the reality of it is that, a lot of measures, it's something that, it really can be interpreted a lot of different ways. You can say that there's been less use of forces in crowd management scenarios, which is one of the really central issues around the consent decree. But you can also say that we haven't seen anything like the summer of 2020 in Seattle since then either.
We're gonna live, and we're gonna keep living in peace and prosperity.
Formed shortly after the killing of John T. Williams, the Community Police Commission serves as the accountability entity for the SPD. It works alongside the Office of Police Accountability as well as the Office of the Inspector General. People who don't know the work of the CPC, what's like an elevator pitch?
I tell them that the government works for the people, and Seattle Police Department is a part of the government, and the people have oversight of all government actors, including SPD. And so our role is to make sure that their voice is lifted up.
Any sort of information?
And that we are ensuring that we are prioritizing the needs of communities that are most impacted by policing. That's Black and brown communities.
How can these things exist in the same reality?
We make sure that they are at the forefront of how government works for them.
SPD's chief Sean Barnes says he knows the relationship the department has had with people of color has been fraught.
Yeah, well, no one should be satisfied with racial disparities because you have racial disparities, which is measured in data, but you also have how people are treated. And so we also not only just look at those numbers, but we also look at the number of complaints and also the number of bias complaints that we have to see if there's a problem systemic of something else.
We are asking our police officers, could there still have been something differently you could have done? That's the culture change we want to see. In other words, and I'll be clear on this, just because the law allows you to take a life does not mean the law would say you should have taken a life.
In its own motion to terminate the consent decree, SPD touted it had tangible numbers supporting improved use of force policies. It reads, quote, "The most serious force, type 3 force, defined as force that causes or may be reasonably expected to cause substantial bodily injury, is extraordinarily rare, occurring only 20 times in 2021 or 0.003% of all dispatches." It continues. In 2024, Type 3 force was used 15 times, or 0.002% of all dispatches.
We are not sliding back in terms of accountability. If anything, as the chief made it crystal clear, we will improve accountability. And this validation today by the termination of the consent decree shows that we are clearly heading in the right direction.
Ame, who was also at the hearing, says the moment wasn't supposed to be celebrated.
The tone of the hearing very much was recognizing that there's still work to be done. That the end of the consent decree doesn't mean that we don't still have hard work to do when it comes to policing and police accountability. But that congratulations, for me, this is really a somber day. It's a day of reflection for the city. It's a day of really reckoning with the fact that we were even under federal oversight in the first place.
Is the goal of the CPC to work yourselves out of a job?
I'd love to see the Seattle Police Department work themselves out of a job. I think that it would be great to get to a place where there's no need for civilian oversight of law enforcement. But I think that a more realistic scenario where that would happen is that there would be no law enforcement, right? There would be no need. Law enforcement has a deep history that is, rooted in the protection of privileged people, of dominant white people and their property, at that time defined as people. And so when we think about a profession that really comes from those really deep and painful roots, can we ever not have civilian oversight if we do have law enforcement? So, it'd be great to say that we'd put ourselves out of a job, but, it wouldn't happen until they did first.
The CPC's support for ending the federal consent decree begs the question, why now? When the organization has expressed it has not been satisfied with the police department's performance. Had there been a different president, would you guys have kept the federal consent decree?
I think that we'd want to see federal oversight continue under a federal administration that really prioritized ensuring that all of the past practices that were deemed problematic under the original DOJ investigation were remedied fully. And so I think that at this point, CPC's support is because we don't see a continued benefit to federal oversight under this current administration. it has shown itself to be hostile to accountability in law enforcement. It has been shown hostile to communities that are most impacted by policing.
Back at the hearing, Ame also welcomed Rick Williams, John T. Williams' brother, who has joined the commission to bring an indigenous perspective to the group.
There's nothing that we can do to bring back people that are harmed by police violence. I think Mr. Williams had shared some really lovely words with Judge Robart following the hearing that, one of the things that we're looking for is the humanity.
Which gives him an opportunity to exercise his voice on matters about policing that's important to everyone. And so for me, it's just about giving him a voice, letting him know that we're committed to doing better and being better.
As for the continuation of the CPC and other police accountability agencies, Mayor Harrell said the work will continue.
I'm not really at liberty to talk about what's in the budget, but I did say on the record as an officer of the court that there are no plans at this time to cut away any of that funding. We want a robust accountability system. But what I also said was we have to recognize that the Community Police Commission, is one example, can improve. And so we will have ongoing discussions on what that looks like.
All departments in this city have a long way to go. We are here to serve communities, and we all fall short of that at times. But we have come a long way, and we're only getting better. And having Mr. Williams join us,
I think why it took so long to come a long way, because nobody wants to be responsible or accountable, or they don't want to get up and say something. I'm the kind of person who get up and say something, whether you like it or not. Hey, I'm not going to come over here and join them and talk pretty. I'll share thoughts of what I think about this human being needs help. Y'all want to play and talk pretty? Not with me, you all.
Thank you for joining us for this Facing Race special, breaking down a troubled chapter in the Seattle Police Department's history. With photojournalists Taylor Schuss and Rachel Kim, I'm Sharon Yu.